Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are, or if you're watching this recording. Thank you so much to the LIT Steering Committee and everyone who's made this conference happen. I'm really thankful to be here with you all today. And thank you for joining us. So, my name is Charissa Powell. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Student Success Librarian for Information Literacy. In this role, I am the liaison to our first year composition program, so English 101, English 102, etc.
My name is Amber Sewell. I also use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the teaching and learning librarian at Hodges Library, and in that role, I am liaison to first year programs. So that includes first year studies as well as our transfer student population. And our co-presenter is Leah Valletta. She uses she, her, hers pronouns as well, and is the graduate teaching assistant at the teaching and learning programs department. As was mentioned earlier, she was unable to be here with us today, but we do have her lovely voice recorded for a portion of the presentation.
We wanted to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we are zooming in from today. The land upon which we live and work in Knoxville and East Tennessee is part of the traditional territory of the Sloggy peoples, now Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and United Ketowa Band of Cherokee Indians. So Yaha peoples, Yuchi, Muskogee Creek, and Shawnee peoples. We encourage you to consider taking action, such as making a donation to a land recovery effort, such as the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, which I'll put in chat.
All right, so before we get started, we wanted to briefly go over our intentions for this presentation. Number one is that it will be interactive. We have a Google Doc here where we have questions that we will ask throughout the presentation to hopefully generate some conversation. Hopefully it will also serve as a brainstorming place where we can refer back to it afterwards. We're going to ask you all to share your thoughts and opinions as well. We are going to share what we've learned implementing our workshop session in the fall of 2020 and spring of 2021, but hopefully we'll learn from each other as well. We've saved time at the end to have a discussion if you all have done anything similar, if not, how you envision a workshop model working in your institution. So hopefully we'll just all create lovely ideas from here. We have 3 learning outcomes for the presentation. Attendees will be able to identify tech barriers to be aware of when implementing your own workshop model. Secondly, attendees will be able to explain how a workshop model offers opportunities to expand instructional topics and examples to those not covered in a one-shot, especially including those of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then attendees will identify methods used to build an instruction model that's centered on the student experience. So before we dive straight in, I wanted to establish a common vocabulary. So what do we mean when we say one-shots? This, in our context as librarians, having one class period during a course's semester-long class to share information about the library and information literacy skills. So what this often looks like at Hodges Library is we have, say, an English 101 instructor who requests a library session, and the class will come to the library and we will show them how to find articles for an upcoming assignment. So now that we've got our common understanding of what a one-shot is, we'd love for you all to jump into the Google Doc and let us know what your teaching program is like. Are you primarily one-shots, or do you have a different instructional method that you all implement? Oh, y'all are so fast this morning. 90% one-shots, a little bit of everything. That sounds nice. Embedded librarianship. Very cool.
I see someone typing about mandatory first year, and I think that that's such an we'll definitely talk about the mandatoriness, and really interesting. We did not anticipate 100 people here, so sorry if the Google Doc is a little wild. This is really exciting to see what everyone else has been doing. Thank you. I also see some credit bearing. For context, we do not have a credit bearing library instruction class at UT Knoxville. I am I would definitely feel like that's a really interesting, different type of library instruction. Someone can't get into the Google Doc.
See some people who are hoping to expand beyond a one-shot. That's really exciting. Hopefully we give you some good ideas and you can share your awesome ideas with us.
All right, should we continue, Amber?
Yeah.
Cool.
So to provide some context for our information literacy program structure, so our 7-person teaching and learning program team plans and coordinates information literacy sessions like one-shots, workshops, that kind of thing for first-year and transfer students. But the folks who are teaching the sessions come from a few different departments in the library that make up what we call our Gen Ed committee. So it's made up of librarians from public services, some from our ag library, and a few other places as well. So we've got people teaching our one-shots coming from different departments.
That was Leah, if you could not tell. So we wanted to share some literature that has really inspired us, and something I've been reading and rereading over and over again is Nicole Pogowski's guest editorial she did for CNRL recently. And it really resonated because it summed up so many of the issues I have felt doing library one-shots. And so this quote that really stood out to us reads, "One-shots are transactional and keep us in cycles of ineffectiveness. They cause burnout." And it just really, it was very powerful to see those words in print and be able to know that that is real. So absolutely recommend checking that out as well. All right, so we're going to share about our previous workshop attempt in the before times. So when we say workshops, we're talking about instruction sessions that are open to anybody. They're not tied to a specific course, a specific section, a specific year. And instead of trying to fit in maybe like 3 or 5 different things into a 50-minute session, we're able to chunk those out. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about when we say workshops. And so before the pandemic, a normal semester for our teaching crew was doing anywhere between 117 and 168 one-shots in a fall semester. And then anywhere between like 54 and 70 in a spring semester. And again, we have a teaching team between like 7 and 10-ish people. Fall semester includes both first-year experience classes and first-year writing, and then spring is just first-year writing. And I think what I really struggled with was that with doing all these one-shots, we were still not reaching a majority of first-year students. And so it was really like this cycle of we're feeling really burnt out at the end of every semester, and I still know we're not reaching the amount of students I'd like to be reaching. So imagine spring 2019, we decide to try something different. We want to envision what a life beyond one-shots could look like for our library. So we decided to do our normal spring semester. Again, spring semester is a lighter teaching semester for us, but we also piloted workshops. So just open sessions that anyone could come to on more specific skills. And Leah will get into this more in a future slide. We will share that course instructors, because both were offered, course instructors preferred requesting a one-shot, which is great. But it also means that we had workshops that had 0 attendance, which is always kind of like a blow to the ego. So we share that experience because we really took that experience of trying something, it not going well. But that's the experience that we took into the pandemic. that we will share in just a little bit. So now in the Google Doc, we would love to hear what folks did during the pandemic. And I think hopefully we will drop that link to the Google Doc again in chat. This is question number 2, and I already see some people. So question 2 is, how did your library instruction program deliver instruction during remote learning? And I think I lost where we are in the Google Doc because there's so many beautiful answers. Okay, so I see some folks talking about using WebEx to provide instruction remotely, mainly synchronous with Zoom, via Canvas. Very exciting. Recordings at faculty request. Ooh. I will say, so someone was talking about one-on-one consults. I have actually deeply preferred one-on-one consultations virtually in the pandemic. Okay. Oh, someone's saying that we had webinars, but were very poorly attended. Yes, it is. We have a slide on that as well. Amber, anything jumping out to you?
Screencasts, which is fun. I don't think I did any of those during remote learning.
So I think someone's writing about videos that were embedded into LMS. Very nice.
Looks like a good mix of synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Continue to pop in the Google Doc. I think we're gonna continue. All right. So we loved this piece so much we had to include another quote. And this really summed up a tension we felt as we were wanting to move away from one-shots. The quote reads, "The pressure of doing quantitatively more to prove value is problematic, not only to student learning by reinforcing demand for one-shots, but also to our own sustainability." So there is something really nice, like the semester that we did 168 one-shots, like that was an impressive number for us. Like that is an exciting number to present and say we had 20 students in each class, like we reached X thousand many students. And so there is that tension between the value and the demand of one-shots. All right, so cut to fall 2020, just to give like an overview of the students we're trying to reach. UTK, I think, hit a record high first year class of 5,512 students. Again, Amber and I both liaised to these two programs. I had 229 sections of first year writing, and Amber had 132 sections of first year experience. And I'm sure there was a way, but Amber and I were both like, we cannot do Zoom one-shots for all of these classes. We will be really, I don't know what kind of state we would be in at the end of the fall semester. So we decided to try again for both our sustainability and burnout, but also from the spring semester, we were hearing students were also burning out on Zoom. And we realized that there was no way to do that many one-shots at the point of need in the semester. And so we wanted to try the workshop series again because it would be easier to offer the specific skills at the time of the semester that our students needed it. And that it was easier to tie that into their curriculum instead of trying to go to as many classes as possible.
All right, so we just wanted to give you an idea of what our workshop topics looked like. So this is a schedule from the spring of 2021. As you can see, we covered a pretty wide variety of topics, ranging from the more classic, if you will, topics like secondary sources, welcome to the libraries, writing research questions, to some more nuanced topics like algorithmic bias. We talked about information privilege. We also had a more informal librarian AMA session, which is like an Ask Me Anything. So we were able to do a pretty wide variety of things. So for a second attempt at this workshop model, we decided that we were going to keep the workshops to 30 minutes of teaching and 30 minutes for questions at the end. They were the same time every week, and we also uploaded recordings of these sessions online. And so these are just a couple things that were really at the forefront of our planning when we were deciding how we were going to implement these workshops. So one thing that was really important to us was consistency. In light of COVID, we decided that keeping things consistent, allowing students to self-pace was going to be the best course for us. Students could attend the workshop live with questions at the same time every week, or they could watch the video when it felt most relevant to them in their work. And also, we did poll the students to try to figure out when the best time for them would be for these sessions. Accessibility was also important to us in the sense that students were able to access the recordings when they needed and wanted them. The workshops were thoughtfully planned based on the general curriculum. So we wanted the sessions to be hosted at a time when the students would be working on that particular assignment. It didn't always match up perfectly, but we were planning it with the comp curriculum really in mind. And although our workshops were aimed at our first year composition and other first year students, we did allow any and all students to attend, and we did have some non-first year students attending the workshops as well. Compassion was a really huge element to our approach. We wanted to take a compassionate approach for both our students and our instructors in a weird and uncertain time. We felt like our students, who were again, largely first years, were dealing with many challenges academically, socially, and emotionally. We didn't really want our one-shots to further contribute to student burnout. So we kept our workshops to 30 minutes so they weren't a huge time commitment for students. And also, because of the large number of students that we serve, we wanted to reduce burnout and Zoom fatigue with our instructors as well. Many of whom, as I mentioned earlier, work in public services. And because of that, they had sort of strange and unconventional hours because of the pandemic. So we were also trying to minimize the stress of trying to plan all of these one-shot sessions over Zoom with our friends in other departments. And another thing that we were focused on was this idea that using this model would allow us to go into new topics that we don't often have time to explore in a typical one-shot, because we didn't have to fit everything into a 50-minute block. We were kind of able to go into greater depth, even though the sessions were shorter. And we're able to cover topics we rarely have time to cover in one-shots, like, as you saw on our schedule, things like information privilege and algorithmic bias, which was also something we were focusing on in this model.
All right. So before we get to some of the challenges that we faced, we would love to hear from you guys about what are some challenges you had while doing library instruction during a pandemic. I'm going to pop back over to the Google Doc. Zoom fatigue and engagement. Yes, I actually did teach a handful of live Zoom sessions, and student engagement was a thing, or it wasn't a thing, really. Yeah, lack of faculty reaching out for instruction. I think that was something I also saw. Everybody was in survival mode, and so anything extraneous just kind of got pushed back. That was part of, we'll talk about that at our last slide, but definitely something we kept in mind.
Yeah, I think that's actually maybe like a blessing in disguise of why we were able to move away from the one-shots, is that I think everyone was in survival mode. And so there was zero pushback from both of our programs. They were just like, sure, sounds great.
Tech issues, that is what the whole next slide is about. It's going to be great.
I really appreciate this person. Miss being able to interact in person with students. I was actually talking about that with someone yesterday, that there are lots of ways that we've been able to use technology to connect with students, but there's something about like walking around a physical classroom that's hard to recreate. I really struggled with that. Gestures broadly at Panini. Yes.
Shifting student expectations. Didn't want to do active learning. As somebody who has ducked out when I see a breakout room coming up on a day where I didn't have energy for that, I feel it.
Oh, professor sending the wrong Zoom link. This was like a whole new fear of mine. Was accidentally going to the wrong Zoom link, or yes. It's like the fear of showing up in the wrong classroom, but in the wrong Zoom room.
Yeah. Or losing the password. That has happened to me before.
These are very, very much resonating.
I was just gonna say, I feel for Anonymous Moose, who's saying that doing in-person instruction, mask wearing was hit or miss. So feeling unsafe as an instructor, that is rough.
Yeah. That was also the one I was looking at. Yeah, and that's definitely something that looking forward to fall 2021 is on our mind as well. Oh, someone in chat said that right now our campus has limited internet connection. Oh dear. We can't access. Oh, you can't access the Google Docs. Thank you. We will also definitely make this accessible after today. Ooh, that's a good point. I feel like internet connection we're all just hanging on.
Yeah. Not having control of the Zoom space if the professor is the host. Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at this last comment about the hybrid instruction. So some people are on Zoom, some people are in person. I had a friend who taught a first year seminar hybrid, and it was just, it was a hot mess. Lots of plus ones.
Right.
Yeah, because it's hard to engage both audience. You need to use totally different methods. Oof. Well, we really appreciate everyone sharing their experiences here. I know that we'll continue to experience challenges, but this is really, really validating.
Yes. Yeah, Ashley in chat pointed out that it's demonstrating how in this together we are. That is a nice side effect. All right, so I've promised to talk about tech barriers. Here I am to talk about them. There were so many, I actually forgot some of the initial barriers that we faced when we started the workshops, and had to remind myself of conversations that we had back in late summer. So our first tech barrier was deciding what platform to use. We've talked about a lot about Zoom fatigue and Zoom burnout. And so we wondered, is having the workshops over Zoom the solution? So that was a consideration. I know for a while we were debating between Zoom Pro and Zoom Webinar. There's a lot of back and forth on, which features do we really envision needing? What attendance can we expect? Charissa even went so far as to ask OIT for the Zoom webinar access. And we did decide to go with Zoom Pro, in part because of registration. We wanted something students were familiar with, but something very simple. We were very aware that students' time and energy was limited, and the more clicks you add, the less likely someone is to follow through. So we wanted something familiar, something quick and easy. So we went with Zoom Pro. We also appreciated that we could ask questions during the registration process. So we, if you were registering for the Nowhere to Go secondary sources, as you registered, you had the option to answer what is the challenge you face when you're looking for secondary sources, and I could pass that on to the co-facilitator for that session, and so they could be sure to address that during the first 30 minutes lecture interactive portion. Another thing we had to consider was recordings. What were we going to do with them? Where were we going to make them available? I think all of us had used the Zoom or watched recordings via Zoom, just with that share link, and we really appreciated how simple it was. Everything is in one place. You had the video of the shared screen and the presenter. You had the chat transcript and the transcript of what was said. We decided not to go that route for a couple of reasons. One, we had the registration links on our first year instruction page on the library's website. And so if we were going to go back in and add links to the recording, were students going to get confused between recording links and registration links? We knew this was something we were probably going to do in the spring as well. So was the website just going to get really clunky if we just had all of these links hanging out? All of the workshops were set up through my Zoom account. So, during the winter break, I took a week off. So I was gone for 2 weeks and I came back and Zoom had automatically deleted some of my recordings. Or what if I had left UT? There would be no way for anybody else to access those unless I had downloaded them. It was a whole mess. So in the end, we got together with our marketing and they made a playlist for us on the UT Library's YouTube page. And so I would go into Zoom, download the recording that was the shared screen and presenter view, trim it if I needed to, and then upload that to YouTube where I was able to edit the auto-generated captions once those had generated. But I was also able to use the description box to include any of the links that we had put in chat during the workshop. And Charissa pointed out, as we were a little further into the workshop series, that we could also use the description box to provide links to go sign up for future workshops. So that worked really well. We had a lot of conversations about how we were going to conduct assessment. For most of us, when we conduct assessment in an in-person one-shot, we just use a Google form. So we weren't sure if that was how we wanted to go with this. But really the tipping point was we had some instructors who were interested in proof of attendance. They wanted something that students could send to them that said, we attended this workshop, either as extra credit or as, the assignment for the day. And so we decided to go with Qualtrics. We were able to put all of our assessment questions in, and then at the end, students could check a box that said, yes, I need proof of attendance, and Qualtrics would generate an email that was sent to the students they could then forward on to their instructors. And one of our last concerns that we wanted to take really seriously was student privacy. We wanted again, to reduce barriers for students to attend. We also wanted students to feel free to engage and not be intimidated that we were going to make recordings available afterward. This is also part of why we didn't use the Zoom recordings, is because student names would show up in the transcript or in the chat transcript. So I think in 2 workshops in the beginning, we did have students unmute themselves and speak up to engage with us, which is great. Like, that's what we want. That's a challenge in these environments. But it did mean when I downloaded the recording, I had to figure out how to protect that student's privacy. Turned out to be a simple fix. I just went into iMovie and put a black square over their camera, so we could still hear their voice and hear their questions, but none of their information was posted in the recording. And from then on, we included a little warning before we started the recording that the first 30 minutes is recorded and will live on YouTube. So if you unmute yourself, great, but your camera view and name will be included in the recording. If that's something you're not interested in, you could drop your question in chat, or you could wait until the last 30 minutes, which was an unrecorded Q&A time. And so those are they're most of the tech barriers that we faced. I'm sure there were other hiccups along the way that is lost in the fog of my pandemic memory. But those are the ones that we felt were important to convey if anybody else is interested in pursuing this. So we've talked a bit about how we really wanted this to be a student-centered learning experience. And so I kind of wanted to break that down a little bit more here at the end of our material. So these are some of the factors that we used really intentionally to think about the students. So the first is design. Why were we hosting these workshops? If you're interested, why are workshops the solution. Obviously, as Charissa said, we did not want to do 150 Zoom one-shots during a pandemic. But this was also a solution that we had looked to pre-pandemic. We knew that we weren't reaching all of the students possible. Out of our 7 to 10 teachers, one-shots were high in demand, and we only had 2 classrooms. So we already weren't, aligning with students' point of need. So we saw workshops as a great way to give students the ability to come in and learn things when they needed them, when it was relevant. Another thing to consider is who's going to teach them. We didn't know what fall was going to look like when Charissa, Leah, and I were planning this workshop series. We knew we wanted a solution that Charissa, Leah, and I could handle all on our own. Our model, we had co-facilitators, so it was 2 facilitators, and then we had somebody there as tech support. So the 3 of us could manage all of the workshops for the semester. We did not know then that over half of our teaching team, the public librarians, were going to have schedules that made co-facilitating these workshops almost impossible. So we were very glad we made this decision. But that's something to keep in mind. Who's going to teach them? What is the model going to be? Are you going to pair people up? Is it going to be individual? Are you going to provide a template for instructors so all of the sessions look the same? Or are instructors going to have freedom to play around? I know Charissa and I made a template that we provided if you were interested, but facilitators were totally free to teach this in whatever method made the most sense to them. We had a lot of fun things between Dragons and Great British Bake Off and Schitt's Creek. It was lovely. How often are you going to hold the workshops? What is too soon in the semester, so students aren't really going to get anything out of it? What is too late in the semester? They're focused on finals and graduation. Another thing of design is being mindful of what else is happening on campus. For the fall 2020 workshops, we ended up scheduling them the same time as a writing center workshop for the same student population. And so being in the student shoes, they were having to choose, if they wanted to attend a workshop, which one were they going to attend? So just things to keep in mind from the student's perspective, what is going to make things easiest and encourage students to come. We said we would talk about attendance. We've got it here. We really, again, saw this through a student lens and knew it was important to not take it personally. We wanted the workshop model because of burnout and fatigue and wild energy fluctuations throughout the day. And so attendance, it was all over the place. It varied differently between fall and spring semesters. It varied wildly within the semester. So in the fall, we had smaller people attend, or smaller groups, but we had students for almost all of the sessions, whereas in the spring, we had robust attendance for the first 5 or 6, and then it really dropped off. So we knew not to take it personally. We had a plan. If you attended a workshop and nobody showed up, usually there were a couple of librarians there, so they would provide the interaction with the Padlet or an activity that the co-facilitators had arranged. So for the recording, people could actually see others interacting with the material that they had brought. But we knew, we had no idea what was going on in students' lives at the time, other than, we're all living in a pandemic. In the fall, we were also living through an election cycle. So we just kept in mind that we couldn't take attendance personally. We did have the recordings, and the views have been great on those. So you can go back and see that was part of the accessibility. Students hopefully were really taking the time to watch it when they needed it and could kind of engage with the material. Next was using social media. As Leah mentioned before, we did use this to poll students to find out when, like a time and date that would work best for them for the spring workshops. So we went to Twitter and Instagram and asked students, out of these times and dates, what works best for you. I think it would be really interesting to poll students to see what topics they would like to see covered in future workshops. That could be a fun way to bring students into the process. But we also used it for promotion of the workshop series. Somebody had mentioned in the Google Doc earlier, professors sending wrong Zoom links or professors not seeking out library instruction because there was already so much going on. So as liaisons, Charissa and I both provided the workshop schedule and information to instructors a couple of times throughout the semester. But we were really aware that some students weren't going to get that information. And again, like Leah had mentioned, we weren't just aiming this at first-year students. We wanted anybody to be able to attend. So we did promote the workshops through social media as well. And we even had like a graduate student attend several of them as a library refresher. So that proved to be really effective. And the last kind of student-centered lens that was really important was the ability to explore topics outside of a one-shot. So I think it allowed for new topics. Something we'd heard composition instructors were struggling with was how to teach their students the difference between a research question and a thesis statement. In a Zoom one-shot, or not a Zoom one-shot, in a one-shot, I don't have a whole lot of time to go over that. I've got a lot of other stuff I need to fit in. I also want students to have tons of time to search on their own so they could find the sources. That was the whole reason they were there. But being able to take 30 minutes and really break it down and explain it to them was really fun for me, but also in the assessment, students really got it and were really excited about this new way to look at research. So it allowed for new discussion, new topics like the information privilege and algorithmic bias. When we did those in fall, the students were really engaged in the discussion. They really participated in the interactive elements. They stayed after in the Q&A to talk to the co-facilitators about it. In the assessment, they were really excited. People were like, oh, I've heard of bias and algorithms, but was too intimidated. And now that I have a basic understanding, I want to research this more. And that led to us having the 2.0 versions in the spring. It also allowed for new partnerships. So, one-shots can be the only time that students are formally required to come to the library. And so we tried to introduce them to as many services and resources as possible without just totally overwhelming them. And this workshop model allowed us to bring in other partners from the library and expose the students to them in a new way. So we had our psychology liaison, Brian Dosh, come and co-facilitate a session with Charissa about how to search in subject-specific databases. Composition students had a multimodal assignment. So we brought in our student success librarian partner from the studio, which is our multimedia space. And she came in and explained the different services and software that the studio offered to help students with those assignments. So we really took advantage, especially in the spring, of our ability to bring in other people and kind of expose students to these other library services that maybe we wouldn't have had a chance to in a one-shot. All right. And so before we open it up for brainstorming, we would love to go to the Google Doc one last time and ask, have you all ever tried anything like this? I know somebody mentioned that they did workshops. So I'd love to hear what takeaways would you share that maybe we haven't hit on, or things that really resonated with you. What kind of advice would you give others? Yeah, best attended was when faculty required or strongly encouraged students in their courses to attend. This was really interesting. In the spring, I mentioned that we had 5 or 6 workshops that were pretty robustly attended. And it was, it's one of those mysteries I'll never know. But like a third of the students were required to attend, had requested the proof of attendance, and the other 2/3 did not. And then all of a sudden it dropped off once we hit workshop 6. And, it was really interesting. It's a mystery of the universe. Maybe it's because the weather got nice.
We did not have the brain space to do IRB for the survey, but Amber did this really beautiful visualization of tracking that we had this weird trend in the spring semester where multiple students came to multiple workshops. That was really exciting.
Somebody said the drop-in workshop series exploded when they went virtual only, ended up adding twice the amount of workshops throughout the entire year and had great attendance. I want to hear how that went. That's awesome. Seeing a trend of having better attendance virtually, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me. If you're on campus, it's do I want to go grab a snack or put up my hammock outside, or do I want to go sit in the library for half an hour? being able to just hop on your phone or your laptop to watch a workshop without having to worry about finding the space or worrying if you're going to be the only person who shows up. Sounds like decisions I would have made as an undergrad. See Brittany's comment in chat about eliminating registration as a way to lower the barrier of entry. It's a really interesting point. We weren't sure, Zoom bombing is a thing. So we weren't sure how tight to make security. With that Zoom registration, we had the option to limit it to people only using their UT address. We also had the passwords, and we decided not to make it a requirement to have the UT address to hopefully open it up a little bit. It could be an area of exploration later.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Brittany's comment in chat. We have guidance from the university that like anything we do on Zoom should have a password. And so it's just like one of those extra logistics that Amber and I spent a lot of brain power on at a time when we had very low brain power. But that's a really good thing to remember.
I also like this comment about naming, that students and librarians have different ideas of the word workshop. But this is also something that we saw with our naming of the workshops. We had somebody in our Gen Ed committee point out that maybe people don't know what information privilege is or algorithmic bias and why it's relevant, like why they should attend. So being more thoughtful about, like, from a student perspective, looking at this, what do they think it's going to be, has been something that we're considering.
Yeah, I definitely like that we're able to go into some topics that I have never been able to spend more than maybe like 30 seconds on in a one shot. But I also agree there's a lot of room for growth about like naming conventions and using more student-centered language. Yeah, maybe Amber already talked about this comment, but the comment about faculty buy-in, I think that was like a huge reason this flopped in 2019 was the faculty really like the one-shots, which like on one hand is really nice. And I think the fact that this was the only option made a big difference. I'm also seeing a comment a little further up about with attendance being low and recording. We had whole workshops that nobody came to, and I think there's something about that virtually that doesn't feel as bad because I don't know the right word to use, but it's really nice that we can record it. And if I have a student that's like, oh, I wasn't able to make it, like, here's the link to the recording. Like, it lives on, which is nice. I see someone in chat talking about the sentiment that there's not enough time during class to have a librarian do a section, which is definitely something both Amber and I have heard. And I think that is like a nice, if you're trying to sell like an alternative, this is a nice selling point that you don't have to give up a class period, which I feel like could go both ways. There's a lot about that. But if you're trying to sell an alternative to one-shots, it's a nice argument. And we had a couple instructors who required like students. I think that's how we got students coming to multiple sessions, was at least one faculty required multiple workshops. And that is a big help.
Mm-hmm. See, somebody asked about fall 21. I think we're in the same boat we were in last summer, unfortunately, where it's very up in the air. I think something that we're being mindful, especially from that student-centered perspective, is we don't want to lose the accessibility component that we have been able to achieve with the workshops, especially, having those recordings to go back to or watching, I don't know about all of our students, but I know I, at least as an introvert, am very worried about how my energy is going to fluctuate when I'm back out in the world. I've been dipping my toes in, but, going back to classes all in person, all regular, I don't want to lose that accessibility component, but it is all still up in the air.
I think I saw that someone had their hand raised. Do you want to transition to like a Q&A, Amber?
Yeah, we've got some prompts down in the Google Doc that we had provided to encourage discussion, but we would also love to answer any questions you guys have, or if you want to take the mic and talk about your experience, have at it.
Did someone raise their hand? Did I make that up? Because now I don't see it.
I had raised my hand, but I just typed my question into the chat instead.
Okay, sorry. So the question is, we aren't allowed to post recordings of workshops on our website. I'm really sorry to hear that. Can you speak to the engagement with the recordings? I'm hoping we can advocate for it being more accessible and convenient. Yeah, I mean, looking at the engagement, I haven't checked it recently, but we definitely see more people watching the recordings than attending live. And it's also made it really easy for faculty whose sequence of assignments are like slightly out of sync with other sequence of assignments, is that they can assign the recording when it's relevant. So like if a faculty member is doing like their primary source assignment later in the semester than everyone else, like the recording is still relevant. I hope that makes sense. Amber, what would you say?
Yeah, I pulled up, so we have 2 playlists on YouTube. We haven't had many engagement or much engagement as far as comments. We've had one where somebody had asked a question that is totally escaping me now. Nope, don't remember what it was. But looking back at the playlist, each playlist has 9 videos. So our Fall 2020 workshop series, out of the 9 videos, has 322 views. And the spring one, which also had 9 videos, has 128 views. And we are seeing, or at least I'm seeing, that faculty are finding these. So I work most closely with our transfer student coordinator. And we're putting together a module to use for all of our Transition 201 courses in the fall. And he had actually gone out and found our Welcome to the Libraries video. It had been a couple months since I had sent this information out. And so he's actually integrating that video into all of the classes for the fall. So we've definitely seen the views go up. When I looked at fall a couple of months ago, I don't think it was at 322 views. And of course, it is always problematic with YouTube views, like who's going through, is marketing watching them. Every time I click on it and it auto plays the first one in the playlist, does that count as a view? I think in a workshop I attended yesterday, somebody said that if it's from a repeat IP address, it doesn't count at double. This is all way too technical for me. I just uploaded the videos. So I know the view count isn't exactly like accurate, but it is really encouraging to see those numbers. We had no expectation for how many views we were going to get on the recordings.
So I saw a question in chat about someone's university being very focused on in-person activities. We relate, that is the fall 2021 conversation. And this person wants to offer an online option, but is worried about own bandwidth and ability to monitor both. And I think that really goes back to a comment we saw in the Google Doc of, it's a lot of energy to do both, because I think they require such different, like the teacher I am on Zoom is really different than the teacher I am in person. And it requires different skills, different like level of checking on things. We don't have a plan for fall yet, but we're definitely wanting to advocate for some version of online something or other.
I'm seeing a comment or a question from Willie about thinking workshops are live, so why not record tutorials that cover the same information for asynchronous use? We did kind of wonder, we have a whole online learning team. Was there overlap? Was it redundant work? And again, just coming from that student-centered experience or perspective, we really wanted to offer something where students could engage with us in the moment with the material. So the majority of ours, it fluctuated as attendance fluctuated, but we did incorporate interactive elements like Padlets and Mentimeters. So we didn't want to lose the availability of our instructors. We had the time, this was going to be our main instruction for the fall and the spring. So we really wanted to make sure that we had a consistent time that we were available to engage in these discussions with students if they were there. Of course, they could watch the tutorials or recordings, lost my words there, and chat in afterwards or set up a research consultation. But just again, thinking of reducing barriers, we just wanted a time where students would feel comfortable to hop in and ask a question about that very specific thing, especially since we've mapped the workshops onto the programmatic curriculum. So if students were really struggling with that secondary source assignment, we wanted a time where they knew that we would be available to answer questions about those.
Yeah, and I would offer up that this is kind of like a suite of library support that I offered up to my faculty. I am fairly positive that every section of first year writing has to do a library tutorial, which is really nice. So this was kind of just like on the menu of library support, resources, etc.
We have a question.
What do you wish?
That's exactly what I was going to read. Go ahead.
Someone asked in chat, what's something that you wish you had known before starting? I was honestly like, there were so many logistics that Amber and I had to figure out for the fall semester. And I think maybe this was naive, but I didn't anticipate being like, okay, what tool do we use? Where do we upload it? Like we had a faculty member ask for proof of attendance, and that was like a week before the fall semester, and me and Amber were just like, how do we offer proof of attendance? So like once we got past that hurdle, like spring semester, I don't want to say it was a breeze, but it was nice to have those logistics in place. I think that was like the hump to get over. What about you, Amber?
For me, I think I wish I would have known how supportive others in the library were going to be with attending and really taking up the reins. So we did a workshop in the spring that was a partner we brought in, one of our favorite people from Special Collections to co-facilitate. And she'd arranged this like really thoughtful activity on how to interrogate primary sources and how to use them. And it was one where we had low attendance, but we had 2 or 3 librarians who attended and were able to provide that interaction and engagement for the recording. And so I wish I had known ahead of time that everybody was going to be so lovely, because especially as we were just starting out, I know for a couple that I co-facilitated with, we really were second guessing the level of engagement that we wanted to bring to these presentations. It's kind of that like, I don't want to feel stupid if I show up with this whole thing. I've decided we're going to spend, 10 minutes working on this activity and then nobody's there. And in the recording, I'm just looking like crickets. So I saw somebody had mentioned in the Google Doc that the librarians assumed students wouldn't show up if they offered the workshops. So kind of similarly, I've assumed low levels of engagement, and I wish I'd known that, others would be there to pick up that slack if it was needed. And I probably would have gone a little further with my interactive engagement pieces. And, if students showed up, it would have worked really well. But just knowing that there was like a safety net there, even if no student showed up, there were going to be people to make it look like it. So you would plan for backup in the future? I don't know necessarily. I think from my perspective, I would have been braver about planning for interaction, like that fear of failure that I was going to propose an activity and nobody would show up. I would have been braver about beating that impulse down. It could have turned out that I beat that impulse down and nobody showed up to interact with me, but I was also the one editing the videos, so I could have just cut that part out and would have done that for anybody else who co-facilitated and something flopped. So I think making a positive assumption that students are going to engage instead of a negative assumption that nobody's going to be there.
It's really sweet, Amber. I think something I also didn't anticipate was that we had one of our collections librarians came to several presentations just because she wanted to get a sense of what other people do in the library. And it was really nice moment because there's not a lot of moments where your colleagues can just very easily come see how classes are going. And I think it was really nice. Lee had asked about other tools besides Padlet. I'm very impartial to Padlet, but I also love Slido, and I taught a semester-long first-year seminar, and my students loved Slido. Are there other tools, Amber? Or else, honestly, anybody in chat?
Yeah, I can't remember. Now I'm getting it confused with another instructional thing I did. I know I used Mentimeter. I don't remember if I used it for a workshop or if it was just for instruction I was doing for transfer students. Jamboard. I was introduced to that a little later and did not end up using that. It's good to hear all of these things about Jamboard. Maybe now I'm going to try it in the future.
I've heard such good things about Nearpod, and it's something I haven't tried yet, but that's definitely on my radar.
That was also the fun thing about workshops. I didn't co-facilitate or do tech support for all of them, but I think I attended all of them but one, just to see what tools other people were using. Somebody had asked, which topics have you seen best attended for your workshops? For me, I feel like the how to write a research question and the secondary sources were the best attended. I think those paired up very well with when those assignments were due. And also those are consistent areas that we see students really seek out help for. Charissa, do you have any other?
I'm trying to remember. I definitely feel like the how to write a research question was also requested by one of the first year writing directors. And that was really helpful. I think I also remember Welcome to the Libraries being really well attended because we cross promoted it with Welcome Week at our university. Also, we know this session could potentially go till 12:15. If it is lunchtime, please feel free to thank you for coming. Someone asked, how do you engage with students who have technology issues, such as students who feel scared or intimidated? One of the biggest things I've done is offering anonymous ways to participate, and I found that to be a game changer in participation. So Slido has anonymous ways to participate. Padlet, students can participate anonymously. And I found that students are also more likely to ask questions if they're anonymous because, I don't know, we're talking about mostly first year students, and I think this maybe applies to lots of people, but there's often a feeling that oh, this is a dumb question, I should know the answer to this. So I have found offering an anonymous way to participate really helpful.
I just want to clarify my question. So we have a lot of non-traditional students who barely can use a computer. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm kind of asking. How do you sometimes I'm afraid to offer these really cool tools because I don't want them to be totally sign out because they have no idea what's going on. That's what I'm kind of coming from.
Gotcha. I am better understanding. And Brittany also has I'm reading her answer to your question as well. Yeah, I think there's, sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. It's probably not a great idea. I think offering like just being very empathetic as a teacher, like I'm trying to like formulate my thoughts on that. But like saying lots of things like, oh, it's okay if you're having tech issues. Amber, like, I guess also using myself as an example, like there are many times that Amber and I also experienced tech issues while we were teaching. So I think trying to demonstrate that that's okay. I will also share that our population is pretty traditional first year students. So we might not have had those same experiences.
Yeah, I think part of that goes along with our decision to use Zoom, even though we were aware of Zoom burnout, like at least students would know how to use that tool. I know like I've had a couple of online meetings where we've met in like WebEx or Teams, which I'm not as familiar with. And so I get a little bit of anxiety logging in. Zoom is what our institution was using for online courses. So at least there would be that level of familiarity with it. See, Melissa had talked about UDL and offering a variety of ways to participate. Theoretically, hopefully this was also something that the recordings addressed. If you were intimidated about what a session looked like, you could go like skim a recording from the week before and you could see what kind of participation was available. I don't know that that's something anybody ever did, but theoretically they could have.
I think this is semi-related to Ruth's question. But personally, I feel like I tried to offer lots of disclaimers about like participate to the level you're feeling up to today, and a lot of acknowledgement that it's a pandemic, none of this is normal. So like a lot of acknowledgement that not exactly like tech anxiety, but like there's a lot of people are experiencing a lot of things all at the same time.
I have not tried to use Kahoot in a virtual environment.
I love this comment from Brittany in chat. I'm going to read it for the sake of the recording. Participation, again, this is from Brittany Ballard. Participation, engagement, and learning looks different for all of us. Just because someone is participating in a way that reads to us as paying attention, it doesn't mean they're learning. And just because someone isn't engaging doesn't mean they're not learning. I love this so much. And I think something I've been frustrating with this past year is like trying to find the balance between empathizing with colleagues who are frustrated that students are not engaging, and also trying to empathize with students that like, this was just like honestly a terrible year. And so I feel like expecting students to be participating and paying attention in a way that we're expecting them to has just been challenging. Like there's been lots of debates about like camera on, camera off. I'm team camera off. Yeah, so just like lots of empathy, lots of compassion. It's been a rough time.
I really like Riley's point that recorded captioned videos of the workshops would be great for students who've learned English as a second language so they can watch pieces over until they get the concepts. More chat about Kahoot. Maybe
Lots of Kahoot comments. I will share the only time I've used Kahoot completely virtually was in my semester-long class. So I had like a good relationship with the students at that point, and it was very late in the semester. So I don't feel like I have context to talk about it in these terms. We've got about 3 minutes left, just as a heads up. And all of our emails are in the slide, and I'll throw them in chat. We would love to chat further. Again, we do not have plans for the fall, so would love to connect. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you so much to LIT for hosting and planning in a pandemic. I've really enjoyed this conference, and so congratulations on such a great conference.
Yeah, thank you all.